Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Iris Turner, Congresswoman Lisa Blunt Rochester's Deputy State Director. One of the many resources that the Congresswoman's office can provide is assisting individuals and organizations resources to access federal funding and apply for federal funding around the state. Today, we are focusing on specific grants from the Environmental Protection Agency, or the EPA. Earlier this year, the Congresswoman was appointed to serve on Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries' Regional Leadership Council. In this capacity, she helped lead the implementation and communication of the transformative legislation that was passed in the 117th Congress. That includes the American Rescue Plan, or known as ARPA, as it's commonly known, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the CHIPS and Science Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, the Honoring Our Pact Act, and so much more. It is our goal to help you make connections and do all that we can to help bring these federal funding to our state. We are here to work with you. Please do not hesitate to reach out to our office at 302-830-2330 with any questions or to connect further about federal grants. Next, we're going to have Jack Bork from the EPA. Jack is the Senior Advisor for Infrastructure at EPA and leads the agency's implementation for the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act. Jack will also discuss the federal funding that's available that EPA has, and we'll also talk in the end with some questions from the audience. Jack, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I appreciate the introduction, Iris, and thank you guys for being with us here today. As Iris mentioned, just sort of want to take this opportunity to get you guys up to speed on EPA and all the work we're doing on the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act, which passed last year and the year before. A lot of exciting things happening at EPA, and just sort of want to run through our programs. So, both bill and the Inflation Reduction Act represent a historic investment in the mission of the agency and are designed to have a significant impact on the health and environment in communities across the country. EPA is very grateful for the work of the White House, Congress, and all the committees for their support of the important work of the agency. We are dedicated to implementing and managing all the resources from bill and IRA with transparency, efficiency, and effectiveness in order to deliver meaningful results for the American people. Here's just sort of like a quick summary of all of our funding. So traditionally, EPA is a $10 billion a year agency, and we have received $130 billion thanks to President Biden's congressional leadership. This is broken down into about $60 billion appropriated from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, $41.5 billion from the Inflation Reduction Act, and $30 billion in expected revenue from the reinstated Superfund tax provisions that were included in both bill and the IRA. To date, we've deployed over $7.2 billion in funding, which has mostly been in the form of $4.7 billion in SRF capitalization grants. Those are water infrastructure grants, and over $1 billion for 2,500 electric and clean school buses that went to nearly 400 school districts, including 3 territories. We were the first agency to award IRA funding when we announced $53 million last November for community air monitoring, the nation's largest investment in air monitoring, which was a combination of IRA money and American Rescue Plan money. In addition to the bill funding that we've already deployed, we are working to quickly implement and design our IRA programs. Many of these programs are new and highly complex, and we expect those announcements will coming out in a rolling fashion this year. We've already announced some information, and we'll go through this more later on. So I'll start with going into detail on the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. So, here's sort of a breakdown of our water investments. It's $23.4 billion for traditional clean water and drinking water revolving loan funds, $15 billion dedicated to lead pipe replacement, and $10 billion to addressing emerging contaminants like PFAS. This money sort of flows through the state. The states operate revolving loan funds. So if you have water infrastructure projects that you're interested on, I recommend reaching out to your governor and to your state. They can help you get in the pipeline. Usually you need to be on the state's intended use plan, and they can let you know. One important thing to know about our water infrastructure dollars is there was a big change under bill. Traditionally, these were only in the form of low interest loans. Now they can be also forgivable loans or grants. So they might make these projects more affordable for a lot of your communities. So it's really helpful. We're trying to make them more accessible, affordable. But the first step is to talk to your governor's office about those if you have a water infrastructure project. In addition to the water funding, we have $3.5 billion for the Superfund program, $1.5 billion for Brownfields program, $370 million for solid waste infrastructure and battery recycling programs, and $100 million for pollution prevention. These are a lot of existing programs that were plussed up. There's more money going out. A lot of this funding goes directly to states. If you have a community in your area that you think is eligible for Brownfields program, please reach out to us. We have a lot of technical assistance in that space. Happy to work with you. But generally, we're trying to get a lot of that money to communities that haven't benefited from the program in the past. As I touched on earlier, we also have the Clean School Bus program. That's a $5 billion program to replace diesel and electric with electric and low emission school buses. We did the first round of this program last year, a rebate program, and made awards. We've currently opened up the grant phase of this program. That's intended for school districts that are going after a larger number of buses and a larger number trying to make a bigger dent in their diesel buses. So that program is open right now. It will close later this summer, and we also anticipate we will do another rebate program later this year, where the rebate program is geared for more smaller school districts that are looking to replace, a handful of buses, 1, 2, while the grant program is sort of designed for the bigger school districts going after more buses. This is sort of a more detailed breakdown of all of our funding. A lot of our water programs, our regional geographic programs, and whatnot. As you can see, a lot of funding going out there. I touched on our water programs earlier, but we've got a lot of investments into lead, specifically PFAS cleanup. These are really important. We hear from a lot of communities throughout the country about this. So I encourage you, if you're dealing with lead pipe issues or PFAS issues, to really look into our programs and start working with your state on a project. On to the Inflation Reduction Act. So the IRA, as we call it, makes historic investments into climate action that are expected to reduce the U.S. emissions by 40% by 2030, while supporting disadvantaged communities in the clean energy industrial base. The IRA investments are designed to drive significant emissions reductions over the next decade, while also laying the groundwork for long-term decarbonization in hard-to-abate sectors. EPA is playing a key role in delivering these programs. That we have received $41.5 billion and expect to receive billions in future revenue from reinstating the Superfund tax on oil and gas production. As I mentioned, we received $41.5 million to support 24 new and existing programs. This makes EPA the second largest recipient of discretionary funding after the USDA. 6 new EPA programs account for 98% of this total funding, and I want to spend a little bit of time on these. The largest is the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. This is a $27 billion program to capitalize existing and new grantees that will invest in emissions reduction projects at the state and local level. We have put out an implementation memo on this, a framework that details that this will be divided into 3 separate competitions: a $14 billion national competition, a $6 billion clean energy accelerator competition that's geared towards credit unions, CDFIs, housing finance authorities, and a $7 billion zero emissions fund competition. That's mostly geared towards residential and community solar. That will be grants, up to 60 grants to states and communities. So that's something that the state could apply for your, if you're a mayor, your city could partner with the state and apply, or a county official, you could apply for this funding. We're getting ready to formally launch this program later this summer. So be on the lookout for more information there. There's a lot more info on our website, one pages, where you can learn more about this program. And as we get closer to the launch, we expect to have more information out there. One thing for you to be aware of is that we're under a very strict timeline for this funding. We have to get it all out the door by fall 2024. So that's relatively quick on our end. So we'll be launching the program this summer, hopefully making awards early next year, and then trying to get those all out the door to communities and other eligible entities before that fall 2024 deadline. Climate pollution reduction grants. This is a $5 billion program that provides grants to states, territories, municipalities, and tribes to develop plans to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and implement those plans. So earlier this year, we had the state opt-in window, so states could opt in, and if they received $3 million for a planning grant. Delaware did opt in. So they received a planning grant. Part of this planning is they have to collaborate with communities and state stakeholders. So encourage you to try to reach out to your governor's office or your state environmental protection agency for to get involved in the planning process there. MSAs also could opt in, and if they did, they received $1 million in planning dollars. I'm not sure off the top of my head if there was a Delaware MSA that opted in, but the state for sure did. By opting in, that makes the state eligible for an implementation bucket of funding, a $4.6 billion bucket of competitive grant funding that will open up later this year to implement those plans. So I think this is a really important opportunity. This is a really important grant. It allows states to sort of plan and work together collaboratively with their municipalities and their counties, because there's a lot of funding out there, not just EPA, but a lot of climate money out there in energy, USDA, DOT, both bill and IRA. So, you know, I think these climate pollution reduction grants can help states, you know, figure out what to go after, figure out how to plan. We recognize that all states and municipalities are in different places here. Some states have a plan and they just need money to implement it. Other states, you know, don't have a plan and they need the sort of push to get one going, or they need the funding. This funding is also allows states to hire staff or a consultant to work on these plans. So a really important resource that's out there. Environmental, climate, and justice block grants. This is $3 billion of a combination of different environmental justice programs that fund community-based nonprofit organizations, support a wide range of climate and environmental justice activities. This is the largest investment the agency has ever made into environmental justice programs. These are all different sorts of programs that can help organizations if they want to start doing this work, or if they've already done this work and expand. There's one program that's open now, another will open later this summer, and they're sort of opening on a rolling basis for the next few years. So a lot of money out there in this space. Even if your organization might not be the best fit, you know, there's ways for you to partner with other organizations that could get money and do this work. We know that this is a really important work, and we want to make sure we're hitting all communities. So really encourage you to look at our website and learn more about these programs. See if there's any entities in your state that have been awarded already, or if not, and you know, how you can position yourself to go after it. Clean Ports Program. This is a $3 billion program that will award rebates and grants for ports to purchase and install zero emissions technology and develop climate action plans. We're in the design phase of this program right now. We recently opened a request for information, an RFI, to try to get a better understanding of the technology that's out there for this work. You know, I think we're really excited about this program, you know, to help ports create jobs and reduce pollution. You know, I know Delaware has a big port that's doing a lot of work, so this could be a good fit for the state to go after, and could provide money for a lot of this work. The Methane Emission Reduction Program. This is a $1.5 billion program that will fund grants and technical assistance to accelerate emissions reduction from oil and natural gas companies. This is strictly for those companies to reduce their emissions, and is also combined with a methane waste emissions charge starting at $900 in 2024, then will increase over time. Lastly, we have the Clean and Heavy Duty Vehicles Program. This is a $1 billion program to provide grants, rebates, and contract support to replace heavy duty vehicles with zero emission alternatives. This is geared for states, for cities, for counties to replace their fleets, which we know are often you know, a leading cause of emissions. So they could get you know, clean buses, clean trucks, you name it. A lot of this money, or I'm sorry, a portion of this money is dedicated for non-attainment areas that aren't in alignment with EPA's goals for climate and for air pollution. This slide is sort of a recap of all of our programs. It mentions the larger ones that I touched on over there, as well as some other programs like our Environmental Project Declaration Assistance Program, Renewable Fuel Standards Program, Greenhouse Gas Reporting Program, Methane Emissions Monitoring, you know, and sort of they're all in different buckets of tackling climate pollution, advancing environmental justice, and delivering clean air. All in all, this is a significant investment into reducing emissions and creating clean energy jobs. As I touched on, we have a number of websites that you can learn more about these programs. We have an infrastructure website, epa.gov/infrastructure, and an inflation reduction website, epa.gov/inflation reduction act. We also have a calendar here of funding opportunities. This will list all of our funding programs, if they are open currently, when they are open to, who is eligible. Highly encourage you to check out that link and see what's out there. That's updated on a rolling basis. So we'll continually be putting more information in there. It includes links to more in depth about the programs. These are some other program resources, to get more in depth on some of the programs I touched on: water infrastructure, clean school buses, recycling, pollution prevention, environmental justice, greenhouse gas reduction, clean heavy duty vehicle programs. So if any of these programs you're interested in, there's more information on our website there that you can learn more about those programs. Encourage you to check that out. Question. So, my information is here. For if you don't know, EPA is broken down into a regional system. Delaware falls into Region 3. So we have a regional office in Philadelphia that can help you with specific projects, technical assistance. There's a number of links here where you can learn more about our grants webinars, grants listserv, grants management. There's region-specific grant information where you look at Region 3 and learn more there. So I encourage you to take a look there. And also links for the federal government. If you haven't got after a federal grant before, you need to be registered with sam.gov and sign up there. You could look at different, that process does take some time. So I encourage you, if you're thinking about going after some federal money and you haven't, to get registered. That is the first step there. And this is a guidebook that the White House had put out. It is a in-depth guidebook to all of the Inflation Reduction Act's investments on clean energy and climate action, not just EPA, but other programs. You can find that at bill.gov. It's a little, it's a lengthy read, but a lot of opportunities in there. A lot of the programs that I mentioned, there's overlapping in different agencies. Like I said, DOE, Treasury, USDA, DOT, Commerce. All these agencies have record sums of money. So I encourage you to look through this book and see if there's programs that are a good fit for you. And then one thing that sort of concludes my presentation, one other thing that I wanted to sort of touch on there is, excuse me, that we also announced earlier this year the launching of environmental justice thriving community action centers. We call them TIC-TACs for short. These are new centers that EPA recently funded with $10 million in startup money. We funded 15 of these throughout the country. They are sort of loosely aligned with our regional system. They are designed to help folks identify federal opportunities, to help folks navigate the federal grant process, and whatnot. So encourage you to look at that. There will be one that's set up to help this region in Delaware. And, I think those will be really helpful. We're tracking that those are on target to launch later this summer, likely early July. So be on the lookout for more information. You can see where the center closest to you is located on our website and find out more on how these centers can help you. But this is sort of a groundbreaking investment that we're putting a lot of money behind to really help people navigate all of this funding that's out there, identify programs that work for them, and then go after that funding. We get a lot of feedback that the federal grant process is really not the easiest to navigate. So certainly understand that. Before this role, I worked in Pennsylvania and did a lot of work with communities there, and that was something we heard all the time. So, I think we're trying to level the playing field here and, help folks see what's out there, because it's really hard to manage it all and keep up with it all, and things are rolling out every day. So I encourage you to take advantage of those centers when they're up and running later this year. And that's it for me, but happy to answer any questions or provide any other information. Thank you.
Thanks, Jack. We do have a few questions that we received from constituents as they register for today's event. So we do have a few of those. I would also like to let everyone know that they will receive the slides that you have, which has the links that you were talking about to all of that information as well. So we'll make sure that everyone gets that, as well as a recording for today. Our first question comes from Sarah in Dover. She said, I own a small business and sometimes I'm unsure what I'm eligible to apply for. Are small businesses eligible for EPA grants?
It would sort of depend on the grant. I think in general, there are some grants where a small business would be eligible for. But there also would be some that are sort of for nonprofits or for states and communities. So I encourage you to look at our website if there are any grants that I mentioned that appeal to you. And then also on those Tic Tacs that I mentioned, once those are up and running later this year, those aren't limited to just the public sector. You could go in as a small business owner and talk about something that you're working on or the challenges that you're facing, and they could really help you identify what's out there. As a small business owner too, this is not an EPA space, but SBA has a number of resources out there for small business owners. So encourage you to reach out to them and whatnot if you haven't done that already.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Clint from Seaford. They ask, are there any grant opportunities for individuals that are not part of a nonprofit, but want to help their environment in the community?
I would say in short that you don't necessarily have to be a nonprofit to go after them, but the most of the awardees are sort of a government organization or a nonprofit, but it doesn't say that you couldn't help collaborate with one of these. I think I touched on our within the greenhouse gas reduction fund, but we're going to have a significant program for residential and community solar. So those funds will likely flow through the state or a county or a city first, but you could certainly, once the state and the city gets, you could go after those funding and do a community solar project or a residential solar project in your community. But the state might be the first stop there.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Patricia from Rehoboth. They ask, due to the changes in the environment, our area has seen an increase of flooding. Is there funding available to assist with the increase of natural disasters?
I think EPA not necessarily directly so, but I think in climate pollution planning grants, I think that's something I'm sure the state is probably looking at, resiliency. So encourage you to talk to them about that and how they're looking to increase the resiliency there. In the greenhouse gas reduction fund, there might be opportunities there for disaster prevention, but most of the disaster prevention might be more the Army Corps or from FEMA. I believe DOT has some grants in this space, and Department of Energy might as well. So nothing that probably aligns directly, but there's definitely a lot of resources out there in the federal government right now. That clean energy book that I mentioned might touch on that. And I would check out build.gov as well, and they might have a section on disasters.
Thank you. All right. And then our next question is from Linda from Newcastle. They ask, does the size of an organization matter when applying for any of the funding?
I think I wouldn't say size is necessarily the criteria we look at, but I think we are going to look at an organization's ability to manage this funding, to handle this funding and to meet our goals. So if you're a nonprofit and that has handled federal funding before, that is obviously something we will take a look at. But there are certainly opportunities for communities, for organizations that haven't handled it. We also have a new program out there within our environmental justice program called Fund the Funder. So that EPA, we give funding out to organizations that have done a lot of this work, and then they will fund other organizations. So maybe for a smaller nonprofit that hasn't done this work but wants to get into it, that's something they can take a look at once those awards go out. But we're really trying to spread this money out and hit communities that haven't benefited. So I would encourage you to apply if there's programs you think you could do a good job, and just be prepared in an application to sort of spell out why you think you're best suited for this funding.
Perfect. Thank you. And then our last question for today is from David from Hockessin. They ask, are there any cost sharing requirements for any of the EPA funding?
It sort of varies by grant program. A lot of them are just straight grants, and there's not a match required. But so I would that it would sort of vary by program to program. But I can't say there's a blanket cost match for all grant programs.
Okay, thank you so much for answering that question. That was the last of our previously received questions. So thank you so much, Jack, for joining us today and providing all this wonderful information. Thank you for everyone else also joining today and learning more about the grants and federal funding that the EPA has available. Today is the first of the series of grant webinars that the Congresswoman's office will be hosting. Our next webinar takes place on Wednesday, June 7th. 2023 at 2:00 p.m. You can register at the link that is currently in the chat for the Zoom. And then you can also sign up for our newsletter on the Congresswoman's website, which has grant opportunities. And also we'll have the recording for this today. Thank you everyone for joining us today. And if you have any questions or need to contact our office, you can find us at 302-830-2330. And our website is bluntrochester.house.gov. Thank you everyone and have a great day.
Thanks.